Hi, everyone. Welcome to Grab Your Keys. I am so excited today. Sometimes you meet great friends through great friends, and I was able to meet Karen Caplan through Jack Daly. So I'm super excited, that I know Jack, but now I even better know Karen. So Karen is an executive coach. I can't wait for everyone to hear your story because it's a phenomenal story. And you have your own coaching and consulting company, right, Karen? So welcome to Grab Your Keys.
Yes, I do. I do.
So we saw each other in Philadelphia at a great Chinese restaurant. We had a fabulous time. I love when we all couples get together. But why don't you tell all the listeners on Grab Your Keys, A, you live in California, right? But B, what do you do for a living, and how did you start coaching, executive coaching and consulting?
Well, it's a very long story, but I'll make it quite short. But
Yeah.
I'll ask you one question, and that's, have you ever heard of the kiwi fruit?
Yes,
Of
I
course
have
you've heard of the kiwi.
Of
So it was my mother, Frida Kaplan, who introduced the kiwi fruit to America back in 1962. And she was the first woman to own and operate a wholesale produce company in the United States. It was called Produce Specialties, which we changed the name to Frida's. And after college, I went to work with my mom. And then I spent my entire career, I ended up owning the company, owning the best known brand in produce, Frida's Specialty Produce, introduced hundreds of exotic fruits and vegetables to American consumers. And then when so that was my business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had 150 employees, and I had a big warehouse, and I had every retail supermarket you can think in America. Those are my customers. And then my oldest daughter, who worked for me, did not want to own the company. She wanted to work there, but didn't want to own it. So I decided to have an exit. So I actually sold my company 3.5 years ago. And, we entrepreneurs, we just can't sit still. And I'm pretty high energy. And I think your brain is a muscle, just like the muscles in your arms. And if you don't work them, they atrophy. So I want to keep busy. So what I really loved doing was helping people. So I launched an executive coaching and consulting business about 2.5 years ago. So I have clients all over the world, some men, some women, in all kinds of businesses. I mean, I have one who was in the IT business. I have one obviously in the produce business, because that was my business, one in the frozen dessert business, in the recruiting business. So that's what I do. And I do everything via Zoom, although occasionally I do meet my clients. But I have clients I've never met, which is kind of fun.
That is. So do you like kiwi?
Do I like kiwi?
Yeah, do you like it? Kiwi. Now that you have eaten it, have worked with it, some people say that after you've worked with something, you're like, oh, I don't really like it. I mean, I love kiwi. But you like it now, even though you worked with it for years.
I think I probably like kiwi fruit better now than I did then. But I will say, we introduced more than 200 new fruits and vegetables to American consumers. And my kids always made fun of me because I always said, oh, I love my vegetables. I love my crunchy vegetables. Like I always want to have fennel and celery and broccoli and passion fruit and cherimoya and dragon fruit. I want to be eating all those kinds of fun things. So it's kind of in my blood.
Yeah, it is in your blood. And once you sold your company, did you find that pace difficult to not be in every day?
Well, that's an interesting question, because in the beginning, my fear was that was my identity, right? Karen was Frida's and Frida's was Karen.
Right.
And thankfully, I had a friend who was a coach who kind of coached me through that process. And I took a break. And I had to pull myself away from wanting to know everything going on in the company. And because my daughter still works there, and I was used to driving to work every day and being around people all the time and dressing up a certain way. Right. And so that probably took, I'm going to say, probably 9 months to do that transition. And it was bumpy. So for anyone who's watching, who's thinking, oh gosh, you just sell your company and everything is just super easy, so you've been down that road, you know what it's like. It was bumpy, but I talked about it. And I talked to myself about it, and I talked to my friends about it. And by talking about it, I found I was not the only one who had those same fears and those same concerns. And so it's been, I guess it's been 3 years now since I sold the company. And I'm more comfortable now for sure than I was 3 years ago. I used to have to lead with, this is what I did, and I just sold my company and the whole exotic produce business. And now, I'm an executive coach and I do business consulting, and I'm really comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic, because I know, it is your identity, especially for women. It's our identities to be a successful woman running a business. And then it's like you give a child away. And you're like, oh,
Yes.
what are you doing in college? What are you doing? Like, where are you? I need Find Friend to see where you are all the time. But it is relinquishing that is also freeing at the same time, because especially with you being an extrovert and finding energy in other people, giving that sound advice, I'm sure everyone loves. You build a huge company and then you sold it. That's amazing. And not very many women in the United States are able to say that. So that's such kudos. What do you feel are 3 keys to success in any entrepreneur?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question.
Because they're my 3 keys to success.
3 keys to success. So I can only talk about my personal success,
right?
Because everyone's different and there's not like a formula.
Correct.
So for me, being successful is, people always said I was so determined. Like, I had a workforce that was partially Spanish speaking and partially English speaking. And I would walk through the warehouse of my facility, every day. And the ladies, they I forget what the word was in Spanish, but they would just say, like, you are determined. So I was, I didn't see any obstacles. I didn't know that I couldn't do things or they'd never been done before, very much like my mom. So that being determined, that was for sure one of my keys to success. Second, if you can't tell, I'm really enthusiastic. I love my produce business. I'm actually a business person at heart. That was something I discovered after I sold my business. I realized that, when you and I met, we talked and, we had a friend in common, and then we were talking business, and I love business. I love talking business. A lot of people don't like, that's not their passion. It's totally my passion.
Right.
So what happens when, because it's my passion, to me, it makes it easier for me to be successful.
And your enthusiasm when you meet somebody else that has that common denominator. And it's not that we want to always talk about business. It's not. It's just that fuels a passion.
Yes.
That ignites the enthusiasm, and it's a mutual understanding. And I think that common denominator is super important with whoever you meet, because you want to make that connection. So I agree with that. So determined, enthusiastic.
And I will say, sometimes if someone is not active in a career, I still find a way to connect with them, because I don't want to be judgmental, like, oh, I had a big career and you didn't have a big career. So anyway, the final thing for me is being kind.
Oh, yes.
So you never know anyone else's story. And I've learned that over and over again. I mean, sometimes we come into any kind of relationship or any kind of friendship or any kind of meeting people, and we make a lot of assumptions. And I'm right up there with making assumptions. But I've always come from kindness. I'm always nice. And what I found, that showing a tiny bit of compassion to someone creates an unbelievable connection, which then, if you want to talk about key to success, that would be one. So I would tell you, in the last 3 or 4 days, I've had several people come to my house to do work. And, they had an accent. And I said, oh, where are you from? And as it turned out, each of the 3 people I asked were from Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately, I could have not asked, but immediately I just said, how's your family? And one of them, their mom had flown to Iran before the war broke out and is stuck there. And they can't even reach her by phone except for every 3 or 4 days for 40 seconds at a time. But by being kind and by being compassionate, and showing a genuine interest in someone, like there was just like an immediate connection. And it ended up really helping our relationship.
Right.
And so I think that applies in every part of our lives. But I think sometimes in business, some people think, and maybe it's just women think, like you have to be hard charging and you have to, go for the juggler to be successful. And sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes just show a little bit of compassion and wanting to understand someone's story really can make a big difference.
I love that you said kind, and I don't know that I've had anyone else say kind. And I always say that my greatest achievement is having my children be adult children, and that they're kind. I always wanted my children to be kind and understanding and empathetic and understanding. And I think the kindness, my son pulled into the driveway and there was a kitty cat that was trying to get in. And he was like, Mom, I think the cat's hungry. And he was like petting it and he was very kind to it. And I thought for a 25-year-old to show the kindness to an animal was like, and I was saying later on that night to a friend of mine, it just warmed my heart that he was concerned and that he could have pulled in and just went on with whatever he was doing. But he was kind. So determined, enthusiastic, kind have been your keys to success. And I love them. One of the things I like to ask is we're in business, big business for 30 years, growing that company, raising children, one child now is in that business. How was it to have a harmony or a balance between having a family and running a business?
So thankfully I had help. So as I raised my kids, even though I was married, it was almost like I was a single parent, but I had a live-in nanny who was incredibly helpful. But I want to tell you what my youngest daughter, said after I sold the company.
Right.
She said, Mom, it's so much easier being your daughter now that you're not a CEO. And I said, oh, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, I always felt like you talked to me like I worked for you. And like, I didn't know that. Right. But some of us who are bosses, right? And if you're the CEO of a big organization, you have to have that you don't have to, but you have presence, right? Yeah. And you have a demeanor and you have a style and you have one style. Like it's really hard to flip flop. And I really didn't realize how it came across to my youngest daughter, who's 32, by the way. And so I would say that with support, it went okay. Like I was never there the first day of school, but I was there the second day of school.
Right.
I mean, both my daughter's birthdays fall at a time when I was always traveling, but we still had a birthday party.
Right.
And I still called them and did something. But it's a balancing act. And I remember hearing an executive with Walmart, a woman, say this a few years ago, that this whole work-life balance thing, we all think that, well, we don't all think, but we may think that there's some special formula of how to have work-life balance. And this woman said, I look at it like a pie. Like I look at every week as a pie, not a day, every week is a pie. And sometimes the pie is all family. Sometimes the pie is all work, but sometimes it's, 50-50 or just a small piece is work and the rest is, soccer practice or whatever. Right. And that whatever it is, it's okay because we're just going to look at it week by week. You're not judged by any one day on how you are as a parent or an executive or just a person.
Right. I read something similar. That's why I say sometimes instead of saying balance, I say harmony, because I feel that everyone wants a balance, but I don't know that there ever is a balance at all. And I think that women especially are setting themselves up for failure if they want balance, because nothing's ever going to be 50-50 ever. What's one challenge that you faced that shaped who you are today?
So one of the challenges I faced, which I really didn't talk about until after I exited the company, was I lived in the shadow of my mom. So this is my mom, by the way, right here. I have
Right
her
there.
always looking over my shoulder. Frida is,
I love that.
she was bigger than life and very well known in our
Well, to
industry.
start a company in the 60s,
Yes,
definitely bigger than
exactly.
life.
And the first woman in our industry. And I would go to an event and someone says, "Hi, Karen, where's Frida?" I mean, that was like the first thing out of their mouth. And it used to kind of bristle me. And then I took a class, and that class taught me that my mom was the perfect mom for me, and that I wouldn't be who I am today and then if it hadn't been for her being the way she was. And so then when I accepted her as the perfect mom for me and accepted that, I wasn't in her shadow, I shouldn't have a chip on my shoulder. But once I accepted all that, I just feel like even now thinking about it, like my shoulders relaxed. It seems so much easier. But that was really a challenge. And I, like I said, I did not admit it for a very long time.
So you said that you learned that by going to a class. How important do you think coaching and classes and educating yourself along the way, how important do you think that is?
Well,
I know
I don't want to sound,
self-indulgent, but it really, I'm going to answer it for you. When you were running Frida's, did you have a coach?
Well, it's interesting because I only had a coach the last 7 years. I wish I had a business coach earlier in my career. I would tell you earlier in my career, it wasn't very common to have a business coach, but there were organizations like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, YPO, like Young Presidents Organization, or the organization I was a part of, which is Vistage. And those are peer groups of CEOs, usually in your geography. But I only came across Vistage, probably 25 years ago. And so being able to meet once a month with a group of company owners or people who ran the companies and find out you have the similar problems and challenges was really helpful. But it was when I got a coach where I had one-on-one conversations a couple times a month. Sometimes I was like so annoyed. I didn't have time to talk to him. I wasn't prepared. I didn't think that anything was important. I could figure it out on my own. And then I would have the call. It was always Friday mornings at 7:00. So I'm an early morning person. And I would come up with something to talk to him about. And then I'd have in my head what I did not want to talk to him about, right? Because we all have our, like, I'm not perfect, so I want to hold it back. And without fail, it would come up. He would somehow question me. That one thing I didn't want to talk about would come up. And then he would help me work through that. And having a sounding board, I think that's the most valuable part of having a business coach, is someone who's not emotionally attached to your decisions or your business. They don't report to you or work for you. So they don't have anything they're going to hold back on. And I found I could share my biggest fears with him. And that was only after time, obviously, but my biggest concerns were, everything you can imagine in business.
And I think that that's really important, because sometimes you feel isolated and on an island. Who are you going to vent to? Who are you going to share, how you're making payroll, how, that a shipment didn't come in that you really need to get in, and, you're telling people not to, lose it, and you're about to lose it. So, you don't want them to. So you really do need a sounding board and somebody at times to talk to. I found it very helpful in my past. Do you feel that having a schedule and goals are something that helped propel you in your business and also now?
Yes, yes, and yes. So I think that if you don't have goals and you don't have them in writing, and you don't share them with anyone, and you don't have like a metrics, like might call it a KPI in business, but you don't have like specific measurable goals, like it's really hard to get to where you're going.
Right.
So, I mean, how many times do you get up in the morning, let's say on a weekend, okay, and you don't have a things to do list, and you kind of meander in the morning, and you get a few things done, you might call a friend, you might exercise, and all of a sudden it's time for dinner.
Right.
And you're like, where the hell did that day go?
Right.
That's what happens in business if you don't have goals. So I just happen to have, this is so funny, I happen to have my
schedule,
my calendar here. This is all the stuff that where are we? Like I measure, I don't know if you can
everything.
kind of see, I measure everything that are my goals. And then I have an annual plan. And of course, you know where I got that from, right? From my, my favorite love of my life, Jack Daly.
Yes.
And I will tell you, I get so much more done. I was actually just totaling up all the things I accomplished in March. So you know that I have a broken shoulder.
Yes.
Right. So I slipped and fell at home. So warning to everybody listening, in a flash of a second, your life can change. And I literally slipped on the floor. I was in boots and I slipped and I cracked my shoulder. Unfortunately, I'm crossing my fingers, I don't need surgery, but that was the middle of February. Okay. So you'd think I probably didn't get a lot done, right? I mean, since then, it's just been 6 weeks. Yesterday, I measured in March, I had 29 get-togethers with friends.
That's amazing.
Okay. I did more walking in March than I did in January and February combined, because it's one of the only things I can do. Right. But I have very specific goals. So I measure against them. And that gives me a sense of satisfaction.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes, if the people watching this are more in business, sometimes we only think we have to have goals or should have goals in business or professionally. And I would tell you that having personal goals are really important. Again, I have 2 daughters, 2 adult daughters, and they both make fun of me because I keep track of how many times I see them during the month.
Right.
So I put an S for Sophia and A for Alex, and I have a grandson named Eli. I put that on my calendar, and I have a goal. I want to have a meetup with each of them at least once or twice a month, and I track it. And so they said to me, so is that how you validate if you think you're a good mom? Mom, is that you measure how many times you see your kids? And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. But time gets away from us.
Yeah, because I find if I don't put it down and I don't schedule my nails and I don't schedule my hair and I don't schedule, seeing people, I don't make sure that my best friend and I live in a different state. I don't make sure she's coming up to see me a couple times. I'm going to go see her a couple times. Like with work and travel and family and home, if you're not scheduling it, you're right. Life takes a hold of you. Even doctor's appointments, schedule them. I schedule everything a week out. I'm a year out. I even see that we have the same nail color on. So I know, great people. I find that's what I wanted to ask, why I wanted to ask you that. I even found like doing things daily, even with my team, because I run a team in the mortgage business, and we started to just do a day, like every day. What's our goal for the day? What's our applications for the day? What are our credit pulls for the day? How many people are we talking to for the day? Are we exercising the day? So it's so funny because Jack commented on my Facebook page today, and I was like, high payoff activities. If you know, you know. But I remember decades ago, high payoff activities you need to definitely do. So if you guys are listening, write your goals down and high payoff activities. Is there
hold on. So have goals.
Yes.
Not too many, because it can be overwhelmed. And when you think of personally, don't think the only goal is how much you weigh. Okay, there are many other things around fitness, around sleep, around interacting with people that are just as important to longevity as, your BMI. So have some goals, not too many, measure them, and then check in on them, and then share them with people. Right. So my friends, I mean, you follow me on social media. So I didn't start reaching out to people and saying, hey, poor me, I'm stuck at home, I can't drive, come visit me. I just kept posting pictures of me in a sling. Right. And then someone would come visit me, and then I would post a picture of someone coming to visit me.
I did not live across the country, I would be sitting in your living room for sure, having a glass of wine. I was so jealous of all your friends having time with you for sure. So probably was one of the best things that happened, because even though it slowed
It
you
did.
down, but didn't slow you down, you really got some quality time with a lot of people. And I don't know what it would be like to not drive for that long.
So, you become innovative. So people would drive to me. I went in an Uber. I had an event to go to, and the Uber driver was so kind to me because, poor me with my sling, that I ended up hiring him to drive me the rest of the month. Like I would give him my
Great.
schedule, and that means I could do my socializing, because when you're an extrovert or you have, commitments, getting there is difficult. And it was too difficult on my husband and my daughter. Like, hey, can you drive me here and there? And then my local grocery store is just 2 miles away. I have one 1 mile away and one 2 miles away. That's how I walk so much. I
Yeah.
would figure out the smallest amount I could get. I'd walk to the store, get a piece of fish and walk home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I don't love that you broke your shoulder, but I do love that you were so innovative. And you had said like a couple different times, like you hired somebody to help you drive. You hired people when you were raising your children. So many people feel like that they shouldn't do things like that. But I really feel that it empowers you to be a better person when you actually help and you can be the best that you can be in handling those situations. Like you took a situation and you solved it. You needed to get around, so you hired somebody who was going to help you. Like that's just great.
And I'm fortunate that I'm in a financial situation that I was able to do it. But I'll take it back to your high payoff activities. So highest and best use of my time was not packing my kids' lunch and driving them to and from school. It was to make sure that, I was supporting the family by running the business, that I had quality time when I was with them. Wasn't having to do the household chores. So by choosing my highest payoff activities, I could supplement by asking someone to help me with the other things. So that really applies to everyone. It doesn't make you not as good a parent or not as good an executive when you have someone help you. I remember the first time I hired an assistant, I just couldn't wrap my head around having it. Back then it was called a secretary. Like, how can I justify that? And then I realized, well, it's not the best use of my time. Right. To be booking my travel or doing the filing or things like that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Is there a piece of advice that you use all the time that we haven't talked about yet?
A piece of advice that I use all the time. Well, I will tell you, I was on a program. I was attending a program 2 nights ago, and a woman said this: always have a 20-year-old advisor. Like always have someone. It was very clever. She runs a huge museum, and her idea was that we all depend on our friends who are most likely about our age and about in our field, whose perspective is really similar. And her perspective was always have an outlier, always have someone who gives you a different opinion that's way younger than you, because that kind of brings you from the past into the future. Wow. And I think about my youngest daughter. I mean, she's 32, but she will tell me the way it is. Right? No holds barred, unfiltered, not always what I want to see, hear. And I think that would be a piece of advice I would give to people is don't surround yourself with everyone that looks like Sue or that looks like Karen or that looks like you. So find someone on the outside who is going to bring a completely different perspective. You don't have to take their opinion, if you don't want to, but for sure, having a different perspective really gives you balance.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I do hire a lot of 20 somethings and they do have a different perspective, which allows me to be better, especially with AI and social media and being on platforms and everything. So great. So now I know, since you said that your keys are determined, enthusiastic, and kind, one of my core values is also determined. So that's why we get along so well.
Yes.
We're very determined. But Karen, if people want to get in touch with you, we're going to have all of your information for people to like, comment, share. And I know that you're packed with your coaching. So maybe if you have a few openings and people want to get in touch with you, we'll have their information there and they can always follow you on social. So I can't wait to maybe see you at the end of the month. We'll figure something out. And thank you so much for being on Grab Your Keys today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. It was really fun.
It was fun. Thank you. And everyone, comment, share, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Grab Your Keys.